Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, Senior Correspondent for Englebrook Independent News. Tonight, we take you across the Midwest for a look at some of the most significant federal criminal prosecutions announced during the closing week of June. From violent crimes and gang-related narcotic trafficking to healthcare fraud, security fraud, public corruption, and organized criminal enterprises, federal prosecutors continue pursuing major cases throughout the region. We begin tonight in Minnesota. Federal prosecutors announced that James Andre Banks, 39, of Minneapolis, received 10 years in federal prison after investigators linked him to a narcotic trafficking while illegally possessing multiple firearms. According to prosecutors, Banks fled from officers during a targeted enforcement operation before investigators recovered 2 loaded handguns, methamphetamine, and cocaine. Prosecutors also noted that Banks had a prior murder conviction, making his possession of a firearm a federal offense. Federal officials say the investigation resulted from a joint effort involving local, state, and federal law enforcement targeting violent crimes in South Minneapolis. Federal prosecutors also announced the unsealing of an indictment charging 25 members and associates of 2 Minnesota-based drug trafficking organizations. According to prosecutors, the organizations are accused of distributing cocaine and fentanyl while committing numerous firearm offenses and acts of violence. Authorities arrested 12 defendants during a coordinated enforcement operation that also resulted in seizure of firearms, narcotics, and additional evidence. The indictment includes conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, firearm offenses, and other related offenses. The charges remain allegation, and all defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. From Minnesota, we continue into Wisconsin. Federal prosecutors announced that Damian D. Gambrell, 44, of Milwaukee, received 240 months, or 20 years, in federal prison, followed by a lifetime of supervised release. Gambrell previously pled guilty to sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and conspiracy to distribute fentanyl, resulting in a death. According to prosecutors, Gambrell exploited vulnerable victims, transported them across multiple states, and profited from commercial sex trafficking while also participating in fentanyl distribution conspiracy linked to a fatal overdose. Federal officials say the sentencing reflects both the severity of the trafficking offenses and deadly consequences of fentanyl distribution. Federal prosecutors also announced charges against Jasmine Cooper of Brown Deer as a part of the Department of Justice 2026 National Healthcare Fraud Enforcement Action. According to prosecutors, Cooper allegedly submitted thousands of fraudulent Wisconsin Medicaid claims throughout a prenatal care coordination agency between 2019 and 2022. Investigators allege more than $5.8 million in fraudulent claims were submitted, resulting in approximately $5.4 million in Medicaid payments. Cooper has signed a plea agreement indicting her intentions to plead guilty. Formal courts proceeding remain pending. From Wisconsin, we continue into Michigan, where federal prosecutors announced their participation in what Department of Justice describes as the largest coordinated healthcare fraud enforcement action in history. According to the Justice Department, the nationwide operation charged 455 defendants, including 90 physicians and other licensed medical professionals, in cases involving more than $6.5 billion in alleged intended fraud losses. The enforcement efforts span 56 federal districts across 45 states and territories, with investigations also seizing more than $182 million in cash, luxury vehicles, jewelry, and other assets tied to the investigation. Federal officials say the operation targets large-scale Medicare and Medicaid fraud schemes while using advanced data analytics and international cooperation to identify suspects and recover assets. From Michigan, we continue into Ohio. Federal prosecutors announced that Charles Veracco of Sunny Isles Beach, Florida, pled guilty to conspiracy to commit security fraud and connected to a long-running stock manipulation scheme. According to prosecutors, the conspiracy operated between 2014 and 2019, artificially inflating penny stock prices before selling shares to investors across the country. Veracco is the final defendant to the plea agreement in federal prosecution. Federal prosecutors also announced the sentencing of Shane Watson, also known as Shane Brown. Watson received 40 months of federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release after pleading guilty to wire fraud, access device fraud, and aggravated identity theft. The court also ordered him to pay more than $410,000 in restitution. According to prosecutors, Watson embezzled church donations while working for Perfecting Church in Toledo and concealing the theft throughout fraudulent financial records and unauthorized credit card uses. From Ohio, we continue into Indiana. Federal prosecutors announced the indictment charging Jana Rivas, Jasmine Rivas, and Devjon Fox in the alleged mail theft and access device fraud conspiracy. According to prosecutors, the defendant allegedly stole prepaid debit cards from the U.S. mail, affecting at least 3,000 victims and resulting in more than $255,000 in losses. The charges remain allegation, and all defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. Federal prosecutors also announced the indictment of 12 defendants accused of participating in a large-scale drug trafficking conspiracy operating throughout central Indiana. According to prosecutors, the organization allegedly distributed methamphetamine, cocaine, fentanyl, and other controlled substances while being directed by an inmate housed at the Westville Correctional Facility. The indictment includes conspiracy, drug distribution, and related narcotic offenses. The charges remain pending, and all defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty. From Indiana, we continue into Illinois. Federal prosecutors announced charges against Thomas Neal, 42, of Chicago, in connection with an international child exploitation investigation. According to prosecutors, Mexican authorities discovered suspected child sexual abuse material on Neal's cell phone after he arrived in Mexico City from Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Homeland Security investigators later conducted a lawful border search and allegedly recovered hundreds of additional illegal files. The charges remain allegations, and Neal is presumed innocent unless proven guilty in the court of law. Federal prosecutors also announced that Henry L. Moore, 33, received 8 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to robbing a U.S. Postal Service letter carrier at gunpoint in Chicago. The federal sentence will run concurrently with an unrelated state prison sentence. From Illinois, we continue into Iowa. Federal prosecutors announced that Donnell Jamar Hins of Monmouth, Illinois, received 17 years in federal prison after convictions of distributing crack cocaine and violating the conditions of his supervised release. Federal prosecutors also announced civil resolutions as a part of the Department of Justice 2026 National Healthcare Fraud Enforcement Action. According to prosecutors, Genie's Health System, Mercury Health Network, and Trinity Health Corporation allegedly paid approximately $4.6 million to resolve allegations involving Medicare billing practices related to heart pump devices. Federal officials also filed a civil complaint against Des Moines physician allegedly falsifying Medicare reimbursement claims involving skin substitution products. Civil statements resolve allegations and do not necessarily constitute administration of liability. From Iowa, we continue into Missouri. Federal prosecutors announced a lengthy prison sentence term for Lorenzo Marquez and Adam Marquez, 2 Californian brothers convicted in one of the largest methamphetamine trafficking conspiracy prosecutions in southeastern Missouri. Following a federal jury trial, Lorenzo Marquez received 360 months in prison, or 30 years, while Adam Marquez was sentenced to 204 months or 17 years in prison. According to prosecutors, the brothers supplied large quantities of methamphetamine, fentanyl, cocaine, and other narcotics to criminal enterprises operating throughout Missouri. Federal officials described the organization as one of the largest drug trafficking networks prosecuted in the district. Federal prosecutors also announced former St. Louis building inspector Abuju Bongo Polando pled guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud. According to court records, Palapo admitted to steering approximately $1.64 million in public-funded construction work to needs connected to himself and family members while overseeing city-funded property stabilization projects. Sentencing is scheduled at a later date. From Missouri, we continue into Kentucky. Federal prosecutors announced multiple criminal cases and civil settlements as a part of the Department of Justice 2026 National Healthcare Fraud Enforcement Action. According to prosecutors, civil settlements totaling more than $23.8 million resolved allegations involving false Medicaid claims. Federal prosecutors also announced several pending criminal cases involving allegations of healthcare fraud, aggravated identity theft, and misuse of provider identification numbers, false statement relating to healthcare fraud matter, and controlled substance offenses. One investigation alleged more than $11 million in fraudulent Medicaid billing throughout behavioral health providers. Additional cases involve alleged false Medicare claims, improper use of physician DEA registration, and the alleged diversion of controlled medication by a registered nurse. The criminal cases remain pending, and all defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. From Kentucky, we conclude our report in Arkansas. Federal prosecutors announced that Cumbri Diaja, Mystic Gear of North Little Rock, received 18 months in federal prison after pleading guilty to wire fraud in connection with a multi-state unemployment benefit and fraud scheme. According to prosecutors, Gree submitted fraudulent pandemic unemployment assistance application in multiple states during COVID-19 pandemic, resulting in more than $330,000 in improperly obtained unemployment benefits. The court also imposed a 1 year of supervised release and ordered her to pay more than $334,000 in restitution. Federal officials say investigation in pandemic-related fraud continue nationwide as authorities work to recover taxpayer funds and identify individuals who exploit emergency assistance programs. Across the Midwest, these federal prosecutions reflect the continued enforcement efforts targeting violent crimes, organized narcotic trafficking, human trafficking, healthcare fraud, security fraud, financial crimes, child exploitation, public corruption, and organized criminal enterprises. While many defendants have pled guilty or have been sentenced, others only recently have been charged or indicted. Under our justice system, every defendant faces pending criminal charges is presumed innocent unless proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in the court of law. We'll continue following these cases as they move through the federal court system. For continued coverage of federal law enforcement, major criminal prosecutions, public corruption investigations, and breaking national news, continue following Englebrook Independent News. I'm Haylee Ficuciello. Thank you for joining us tonight and have a great evening.